for OMF and for other partner agencies that OMF is linked with in East Asia. So I always say, if God can call somebody in their late 40s an architect into mission, then there's no escape. If God is calling you, then there's a reason. And be open to the call. There's a place for everyone in mission. As I was doing my building projects, I traveled a lot and I became much more aware of the growing ecological crisis that is affecting now every part of the world in different ways. And after a time, about 10 years ago, I was asked to focus on this for OMF, to explore this growing crisis, to explore the impacts of the crisis on the peoples of East Asia, and then to help OMF explore how we should respond as a mission. So this has been a journey for OMF, and many other like-minded mission agencies have been wrestling with similar questions. So what I want to do is just very briefly touch on what this crisis embraces, what it's about, and what we are doing in OMF to respond. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the climate conference, the UN climate conference in Glasgow at the beginning of next month. This is a great opportunity for leaders, people of influence from all over the world to come to this country. And hopefully, we need to pray that this will lead to a radical commitment to change that is needed to reduce the impacts of climate change and the causes of climate change. But the ecological crisis is much more than just climate change. So just this last week, there's been another UN conference, this one in Kunming in China, around biodiversity, the loss of biodiversity across the world. And this is much less well known, and yet I think equally important, because humanity is living unsustainably on the whole across the world. It's having huge impacts on biodiversity, and the loss of habitat for endangered species is a growing phenomenon, and we are seeing species becoming extinct at a very unprecedented rate. And this is likely to accelerate into the mid-century at least. So loss of biodiversity is something we should be concerned about. God made all these creatures for a reason, not just to serve us, but something he delights in and wants us to look after. But also we are seeing pollution of the seas, the rivers, the soils, the atmosphere, heavy metals, plastic, of course, and the degradation of the soil, the fertility of the soil, fish stocks, coral, the world's forests, and so on. Right across the world, we are seeing a very troubling crisis. I think it's the only word we can use, really, an ecological crisis. And the UN Secretary General has said that humanity is waging war against nature. So this is widely recognized, and the urgency is now generally being talked about by governments and other agencies across the planet. But it needs to be taken very seriously, and we need all of us to respond in appropriate ways. So this crisis is something that none of us can ignore. And how have we responded as a mission? So I want to talk about three strands. So here's my little bit of rope that I was given by someone in the Bristol docks. It's a 3-strand rope. So there are 3 strands to creation care that I want to talk about. And in OMF, we talk about these 3 strands as aspirations, things that we are aiming to do, to change. And the first is, as part of our mission strategy, we should consider creation care. What part of creation care integral mission got to do with our vision and mission to see church planting movements, indigenous biblical church movements in all the people groups of East Asia? How are these things connected? Well, we talk about creation care integral mission. And just to give you some feeling for what this can and is involving, the opportunities there are. The first is missional business. There are people in East Asia engaged in organic food production, in environmental consultancy, in recycling or upcycling of waste materials like plastic, and so on. These are missional businesses, businesses run on Christian principles with the aim of modeling Christian values and helping people to see that Jesus is Lord of all things, of business, of the working place, and so on. So missional business, then training and job creation. One example of this in Mongolia, someone from the UK visits Mongolia on a regular basis to train people coming out of alcohol addiction in upcycling of waste materials. And this creates jobs and hope for the future. It gives these people opportunities to make a living and to live out their new Christian faith. Then there's disaster relief. As with climate change and so on, there will be increasing situations where there are disasters caused by typhoons or flooding or whatever it might be that requires emergency responses. And just in the Philippines, for instance, where the typhoons have always been there, but are increasing in their severity, this has led to opportunities for church planting and for things like seaweed farming that has created jobs and so on. People have come to faith, churches have been planted, and lives have been renewed through the OMF's responses to disasters. And then we need to recognize the growing phenomenon of migration across the planet. This is for all kinds of reasons. It can be political. It can be like the war in Afghanistan, but also because of environmental pressures that people have to leave their homes through flooding, through climate change, soil degradation, they can't grow food anymore. So the UN is predicting 200 million environmental refugees by mid-century. And not everyone wants to leave home. Some do, but many people only leave because they have to. And so we need to think about how we respond to that new challenge for people to face the need to migrate. And then there are seasonal migrants in China, in other countries. People migrate to the cities every year to get jobs, and they leave their families behind. And what does this mean for church life? It adds yet another complexity to what church can do and be about for seasonal migrants. But it also creates opportunities as people come to the city. if they hear the gospel and come to faith, they can return home as evangelists, as church planters. So in all these things, there are challenges, but also we can see them as opportunities for mission. So let me ask you a question. What are your thoughts about this kind of integral mission? Do you see it as a distraction from our gospel proclamation and disciple making? Or do you see it perhaps as just simply a platform for mission? Or do you see it as an essential part of mission? Would you like to share your thoughts about creation care integral mission?
Hello, David.
Hi.
It's David, the other David.
Hi, David.
So more and more, and especially since I've been at All Nations, I'm beginning to think that it's an essential part of mission, and that we're meant to be stewards of God's creation, and we're not exactly doing a great job. Yesterday, it was interesting. One of the modules I'm doing here is global peace and justice, and we were talking about how, or just the inequality, across the world, but on a human level. So the richest and poorest countries and that sort of thing. And I was thinking, well, how does that square up with, creation care and that? But I guess, for me, where you have the worst, how can I say, the poorest people in the world are mostly affected by, the largest disasters or environmental.
Yeah.
So I think it is all integral, and it's all as important as each other, I feel, if you understand.
Yes, I do. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can't sort out the inequalities of the world without tackling the climate change, and I guess vice versa as well. So yeah. And of course, when we're doing a creation care project and stuff, you want to be evangelizing, and if you've got people to disciple along the way, you need to be doing that as well. But yeah, it all goes together, doesn't it?
I think so, absolutely. Word and deed, we can't really separate word and deed. The two should speak the same message, be consistent. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that leads very neatly. Thank you for that, David, that insight. That leads very much into my second strand, which is how we do what we do. So we've talked about what we do as mission, but what we do, or rather how we do it, is just as important, that we should walk the talk. So I think in mission, it's tempting to think that the ends justify the means. So just to give a very crude example, if we believe we need to fly to another continent to do something, then the means, if we can afford it, we go. That's basically how we think or have thought in the past. But I think we have to think more deeply now about the true cost of what we do, including different kinds of cost. I'm thinking of social costs, cost to family, cost to our neighbors, our communities, and environmental costs. So flying somewhere has an environmental cost, and it's not necessarily wrong, but we should at least think and pray before we add environmental pressure, if you like, through the work we do. And this applies across our lives. How we travel, it's just one part of it. What we eat, what we consume, how we live. It's all part of a way of life that should be sustainable, that we should live in harmony with what the earth can sustain. So this is a much harder thing to talk about in mission. But I think, as you've just suggested, David, our message would be, I think, weakened hugely if the way we live does not live out our values around caring for God's good earth and all its creatures and our neighbors. We should care for our neighbors across the planet. We should live in ways that respects their needs and understands the impacts our way of life has on people in other parts of the world. And I learned this very directly by doing building projects and suddenly realizing that the materials I was using in my buildings were coming from places unsustainable sources, tropical hardwoods, concrete, and so on, and that we should really think much more deeply about using sustainable, replaceable materials like bamboo, which is a wonderful, underappreciated building material. So we need to think more deeply about how we do what we do. So let me ask you the next question. What do you think this actually means for the way we engage in mission, our methodology of sharing the good news of the gospel of Jesus? Do you have any thoughts about what that might mean for our methodology of mission? Well, let me give you one example, a very practical thing that OMF UK are doing, which is offsetting our carbon footprint. So this is a policy that OMF UK is exploring, that we reduce our carbon footprint as much as possible and that we offset the rest. In other words, we work with partners who can provide carbon capture through planting or using water filters or different kinds of methodology to capture the carbon that we've contributed to the atmosphere. So to reduce and offset our carbon footprint is something that OMF UK is looking at and that we can all do as individuals, as families. And it should become, in my mind, like just a normal part of life, like paying your taxes, not an optional extra, but just something we all do to offset the negative impacts of what we do. But maybe you can think of other things we can do in our work and in our daily life to reduce not just our carbon footprint, but our ecological footprint, the negative impacts we have. And there are all kinds of resources to do this, what we eat, as I say, the clothes, and our use of things like water, which we can take so much for granted, but it's actually a growing problem across many parts of the world. The shortage of water is becoming very severe in many places. I'll go on to the third of my strands, which is thinking more deeply about why we do what we do. So OMF's third aspiration is, as part of our disciple making, we should teach creation care. Being clear about what we believe the biblical basis for creation care, why this matters to God, why it's part of his plan for humanity. Right back in the beginning of Genesis, we're given very clear instructions about our responsibilities to care for God's good earth and its creatures, and so on. So in OMF, we developed a number of policies and statements that help us think this through and are available. Please get in touch if you would like more information. But we have a theological statement. We started with that. That's available online. What does the Bible actually have to say about creation care? The role of Christians in caring for creation. There are now some booklets available online to flesh out this biblical basis for creation care. And there are some Vimeos giving examples, recent examples of creation care integral mission from the Philippines, and so on. There are many resources out there from OMF and other agencies that are easy to find. And I think we need to encourage a debate, an exploration of these things. Some things are obvious, some things are perhaps less straightforward. And we need to face those areas where people differ. For instance, the future of creation, the eschatology. What is the future of creation? The biblical teaching on that, and why does that matter for how we live today? But also, I think we need to see this as a two-way street. And it's not that we have all the answers. We do not have all the answers. And I think this is an area where we can learn so much from people of other faiths, other cultures, other traditions. And I see this as a fantastic opportunity for what we call common ground. I just give you a few examples of this. We heard in the first presentation about the Chinese respect for ancestors, and there is a wonderful saying in Chinese. Chinese had many of these 4-character sayings, and one of them is basically drink water, think source. When you drink water, think about where it's come from. Now, this originally referred to your ancestors. When you meet someone or think about yourself, be grateful to where you came from, your ancestors. And of course, we can apply this very directly to the source of all life, the creator God. This is a great way of connecting with Chinese worldview, if you like, to point people to the source of all good things. But also, of course, we can apply it very directly to water itself, that water is not readily available to everyone who needs it. It's becoming more and more difficult for everyone to find clean drinking water or enough water through the year to water their crops and so on. So that's the very practical outworking about conserving water. And if you look at Islam, there are so many teachings in the Quran, in the Hadith, that around the value, the importance of respecting and conserving water. And these are examples of common ground that we can explore together with our friends, people of other faiths. We can demonstrate that we understand their values and share them. And this can lead to trust building. We can develop friendship and it gives us opportunities to talk about our faith and the good news of Jesus. And this has been happening, for instance, in Bangkok. A group of people from different faiths, Buddhism, Islam, and Christians, have met to talk about water in the big city. Fresh drinking water is a big problem, even in Bangkok. And there is an openness to hear what Christians have to say about this. So think of common ground, that creation care challenges provides real opportunities to talk to people about things they understand and value, and lead them into a greater openness to hear more about the gospel. So there's common ground, but also I think we have to take that further, and in our disciple making and training of younger missionaries, perhaps we need to include creation care thinking in our training programs. And I think Liz will be talking about worldview in a minute, and worldview should embrace the ecology of the land that people call home. This is deeply important to most people in the East. They don't separate the physical and the spiritual in a way that perhaps in the West we have been tempted to do, to some extent at least. So to demonstrate that all these things connect, that Jesus is Lord, Lord of all that has been created, everything was made through him, is part of our message, part of what it means to understand the Lordship of Christ, but also part of what can help us connect with people who value their land, their place, its distinctive qualities. So this is the third strand that I want to share with you. And let me just ask you if any of you are drawn to a particular people group. I would just encourage you to think about their worldview in relation to their land, what they value, and their traditions, their stories, their sayings about the land that is home for them, and the ecology, all the animals and plants and so on, how it works. I would encourage you to explore that and to see the good things and the things that are not so good, perhaps, and how you can connect with them. So let me ask you, my last question is, are there examples you can share with us of from the place you may have visited, or people you've been reading about or getting to know in some way, where their feeling for the land has touched your hearts maybe, and that you feel has offered a challenge or an opportunity to respond? So any stories, any comments on that theme?
Yeah, I can. Charles and I were living in the Philippines for a while, and land certainly was a big issue with the people that we lived amongst. But something that was just tragic for their people group was that there were very large multinational corporations buying up the land to put big plantations on, and so the small farmer was gradually being forced out of his land. And it kind of, when a person has had land in the family for many years, he almost becomes a non-person when his land goes. That's the sort of sense that I had when they had this pressure to sell because they were offering quite good money, and then the family all were attracted by that, and other people were selling up, and then it was just like a steamroller effect, really, that huge amounts of land were gone from those families. It's very tragic and difficult to know how to even get involved in that. Yeah.
Well, there are opportunities here. I remember talking to someone in North Thailand around land rights, and similar conversations in the Philippines, the need for legal missionaries to help people figure out what their rights really are, and particularly for incoming people groups who don't have legal title to land. Simply they've had 3 generations of established use, that's it. But this is a growing problem. Security of tenure is a technical term. But another example of this, I just closed with another story from Thailand, which is I met a theological student in Singapore. I got to know him, and I asked him one day what we could pray for. And he was training to be a pastor in Thailand. And he said to me, I pray for the soil of Thailand. And that amazed me. I just wasn't expecting that kind of emphasis. But he realized that his people depend on the health of the soil of Thailand. And it's in deep trouble. As in many parts of the world, the soil is being built on, filled with salt or fertilizer or degraded in other ways. And this is true in England. This is a worldwide phenomenon of soil degradation. And here was a young pastor trainee who understood this and saw that as a Christian, a leader, a future leader, he should speak out. He should do something about this and model and help people to respect the soil and to ensure its future health. So again, an example of how faith has led to a practical outworking. So I think I'll close there. I just want to summarize to say that the ecological crisis is very real. It's impacting most people on the planet in all kinds of different ways. Therefore, it's for all of us to think about this and to pray and to see how we can respond. And it will change how we do cross-cultural mission. We've already heard about diaspora and returnee work, ministry, the whole phenomenon of increased migration, people having to move home, many other things that will change the way we do mission. But the opportunities and the need for mission are there. And so we can pray and help each other to respond with missional hearts. Natch has put lots of things in the chat box, some resources, some websites about opportunity and so on. But please get in touch. As we've already heard, we are here to continue the conversation with you as best we can. We'd love to meet you when that's possible. So please feel free to do that, to continue exploring what this means for you. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thanks, David, for that. We're now going to have a 5-minute break. So stay online, but just get yourself a cup of tea, stretch your legs, and then come back in about 5 minutes, and we'll start again. We'll hear from Liz on worldview, and then Miriam Davis has just joined us. Hi, Miriam. And she's going to be speaking on momentum, yes. So we look forward to that after our break. Hi, Miriam. Are you okay?
Yes, thank you. Just got rather a croaky voice and full of cold, but apart from that.
How was the wedding?
It was good, thank you. I left before the service finished because I thought I was going to be a bit late otherwise, but that was fine.
Okay.
I was there for the main part of it, so
Yeah.
good to be there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. And
no, that's okay.
I'm
I
sure
probably
it's going
need to
to
get
be
my
okay.
stuff, get my things organized here.
Mm.
So if I start at
Okay, I think everybody's here. Are Hannah, Deborah, and are you all there? Okay, there we are. Okay. We're going to start again. I hope you feel refreshed, ready to go for another little while. So we're going to listen to Liz now, who's going to tell us about worldview, or give us a bit of an introduction to worldview.
Yeah, so we've already mentioned a little bit about worldview. I think Rachel chatting about earlier on about one or two things regards China and going to school there and how different it must have been, or it must be for children growing up there, and how different our worldview would be from theirs, having had such a different background. So we're going to have a little look at worldview. It's a training that actually, I'm just going to highlight a few aspects of the training that we offer. Just lately, there's been quite an influx of different people from across the world into the UK. the most recent group, I think, well, the most recent would probably be the Afghanistan people. Probably not many of them are likely to turn up in our churches, but you don't know. But they certainly will be in our communities if you live in an area where they've been housed. Another group that have come into the UK or are continuing to come are people from Hong Kong in quite large numbers. And some churches have approached us and individuals saying, please help us. We got 5 families turn up in our church, and we need to know more about how to connect well with them. So we've been offering this training, which is in 3 parts about worldview. And it's really to help us think about what our worldview is, helping them to think about what another people group's worldview might be, and how best to facilitate good communication between us, and how best to help them to understand us and the crazy way we do things, or why we do things in a certain way, and why they might find it difficult to get to grips with life in the UK. But beyond that, making really good connections so that we can better understand each other and better communicate the gospel message to folks from other places. So I'm going to ask Natch to share. I've got this my lovely host over there in Wales is going to share my PowerPoint since my computer was a bit weird this morning. And we'll see if we can get that going, just to give us a few pointers in this whole topic of worldview.
Hold on just a second, sorry.
I can't really do it justice in sort of half an hour, okay? This is just a taster of sort of worldview and what might be included in it. That's okay. Cheers, everyone.
Slow, but we'll get there.
That's all right.
Can you see a slide that says worldview?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. Thanks, Snatch. So that's it. That's the topic, worldview. What is worldview? Well, in its simplest terms, I think it's the way we view the world. There you go. Can we have the next slide, Natch? It might give us a bit more insight. Or not actually, but yeah. And you'll find folks from across the world and even across the street, even another Brit may actually have a different worldview to yours. Can we have the next slide and maybe the next one after that? Because I think the next one might be blank. Yeah, the next one after that. Thanks. We tend to look at quite a few different definitions of worldview when we're running the course. But this is one that I kind of liked by a chap called Norman Geisler. He likens various worldviews to coloured glasses through which people see themselves and the universe around them. Everything is given the tint or hue of whatever particular worldview glasses the person happens to be wearing. And since the vast majority of people are used to just one pair of glasses from the time of their earliest recollections, they're not predisposed, even were they able, to lay those glasses aside, even temporarily, in order to look at the world through another pair of glasses. So it's really, I thought, quite a nice summary of what we're talking about. It's like we've all got a particular pair of glasses on, and your worldview may not be the same as someone else. Your pair of glasses might be a different colour and have a different, completely different look at things in a completely different way to somebody else. Behind that, of course, if we take the next slide, Natch, is culture. Culture feeds into worldview. When you think about culture, what things do you think could be included in that? When you think about, somebody's culture, what specific things might you think about when you look at somebody else's culture? Any ideas?
How people behave.
Yeah, how people behave, Charles. Thanks. Any other ideas? Just one word answer.
What people eat.
Yeah, what people eat.
Beliefs reflected in how language is used.
Yes, beliefs, language. Yeah, very important. Okay, if we look at the next slide, I've put together, well, I haven't put it together. This is somebody else has put together this as well. A way of life of a group of people, the behaviors, beliefs, values, and symbols that they accept, generally without thinking about them, that are passed on by communication and imitation from one generation to the next. So culture feeds into worldview, but all these behaviors, beliefs, and values, etc., they sort of give meat to that worldview. If we look at the next slide, it kind of breaks it down into some practical things. So if you look at somebody's culture, the one thing that's missing here is land. Sorry about that, David. That needs to go in there. Land is actually really important. And people's identification with land is actually an important one. But you'll see there, we've mentioned language, food, religion. There's lots of other things that actually make up culture. Even the jokes people laugh at, you know, humor is can be very specific to a culture. I mean, here in the UK, we can be incredibly sarcastic and really insulting. If you translate that and take it over to, for example, we lived in the Philippines, you go and insult somebody and that's really, really, you know, rude. But yet they can highlight something on you, like maybe if you've got some lump on your head or something, or some disability or something, you know, and they would highlight that and think it was funny. So what we laugh at is very specific. Medical cures, the clothes people wear, the manners they have, the way they bring up the children. There's lots of different things which feed into culture, which would be vastly different depending on where you're from and what your background is or was. Celebrations, what people do in their spare time, if they even have any. In China, perhaps they don't have much spare time. Could we look at the next slide, Nach? So when we do this course, we tend to look at sort of big definitions of things, and then we bring it down to the smaller practical things. Now these pictures I'll show you were put together by a Chinese lady who was very insightful about British culture and her own culture. And so the blue side is the British kind of thing, and the red side is in this case it's Chinese, or it could also be other Asian cultures as well. So this is in the restaurant. Now in Britain, we tend to like the sort of the quiet ambience of a restaurant, where you can have a nice social chat to somebody over some great food. In China, it would be quite different. In a good Chinese restaurant, it might be super noisy, lots of clattering and banging and lots of wonderful food, but lots of noise and activity and just busy, busy, busy. And that is regarded as something fantastic, you know, but for us, we may not appreciate that that is a really great thing, but a different way of looking at it completely. I don't know if anybody's had this experience of being in a Chinese restaurant, in a real Chinese, I'm sure Rachel probably has, but and anybody who's been to Asia and stuff, and even in Bristol, I'm not talking about takeaway, I'm talking about sit down, good Chinese eating, busy and noisy. Perhaps we'll look at the next slide, and that will be a different scenario. This is how she interpreted a British party on the blue side and a Chinese party on the red side. Does that give a correct impression, do you think? Anybody like to say anything about that?
I don't know about China, but in Japan, it was very much like this. You know, a party would be a big circle of people like this. So yeah, I think it's accurate.
Mm-hmm. And in the UK, we all sort of stand in little groups of 2s or 3s and chat and stuff like that. Like, can you imagine what it's like for a maybe a person from Asia to come into a British party and not quite know how to do that, or whether that's even a fun thing to do or not. But yeah, it's just something to think about. I thought these pictures were quite insightful, really. Could we look at the next one? Again, this is in the West, British, not necessarily British, but a sort of Western individualism, as opposed to Eastern, more communal living. And so, yeah, we have the British on the blue side, and the Chinese or other Asian cultures would be very much more on relational, being part of a group as being the dominant thing. I think in China, you even present your surname first and then your Christian name afterwards, identifying that you're part of this family and that your name is Bob or whatever, but actually you're in the Lee family as your first point of recognition, and then you're Bob. I think in the UK we tend to, yeah, my rights, I want to do this, I want to do that, and you know, what the family wants us to do. Yeah, we're happy, I think, if our mum is happy that we've done a certain thing, but it's like we want to choose. It's just a different mindset and a different way of being. When we were in the Philippines, we found that families would choose one of their children to be the sort of the breadwinner, and he would then be expected, usually the oldest one, he'd be expected to finance all his brothers and sisters going through school and college, and he didn't question that, and he didn't feel it was a sacrifice. It was just, he was part, that was his role in the family, and that was priority to do that, not thinking of his own desires and his own aspirations. That was like second place. Does anybody else have any experience in this sort of or an example they could give where perhaps it highlights the difference between our worldview and somebody coming from outside the UK?
When we lived in Singapore, we were very struck by how Chinese the culture is, even though it looks very Western and people speak English very well. But often their values and way of doing things are very Eastern. And we found in churches quite surprising how people did what they were told. The pastor would tell someone to go on holiday to such and such a place to have a certain experience, a sort of retreat, and they would do it, or to do a certain job in the church or whatever it might be. And they just did what they were told in a way that may used to happen in Britain, but I don't think happens very much anymore, that people choose the work they do. And I think it's quite interesting in the East now that things that look Western, the cities like Shanghai, looks like a modern global city. It is, with skyscrapers and all the rest of it. But the culture is very different. And I found in the building work I was doing, the way people do business is extraordinarily different from the building world in this country. So it's this disconnect between appearances and the reality that takes a bit of getting used to.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's important to remember that we have a different pair of glasses on, and that we also need to look at ourselves. I remember, how could we translate for this particular illustration where we're very individualistic and some other cultures are very more communal and group orientated. There's lots to think about here. Is, you know, how could we translate that into perhaps inviting someone for a meal to our house? I always used to find that, you know, if it was the Chinese students in Bristol, they'd rather come, or Filipinos, definitely. You'd invite one and actually they bring two of their friends as well, and you didn't even know. But that's fine. I think they would rather have company. In my experience anyway, I don't know. I think some folks would also be quite happy to be invited alone, you know, but I think having the identity of the group actually helps them to be more relaxed. And so inviting them over to your house or whatever, sometimes it's nicer to have a group rather than one individually. But that might translate into that sort of practical outworking. Can we have a look at the next slide? Is another scenario, I think, Natch. Yeah, relationships are again on the one side, the British. You know, we've got our network, but this is fairly limited. Whereas Asian, you know, relationships is the big thing, really, and it's, you know, they are interconnected with all sorts, and they form relationships in all myriad of ways, and it's really important. It's fundamental to survival in their world. So you've got the family, then outside the family you've got the extended family, and then maybe you've even got you know, people that you've connected with, or your father's connected with, your mother's connected with, who are going to be important in your life, and all that is really crucial. Whereas in the UK, where it's a little bit boring, you know, we've got our aunt and our uncle and a couple of cousins, and yeah, we got a few friends, but it's nothing like the sort of emphasis that Asians put on family or on relationships generally. So I think it's, again, something to be considered when we're looking at connecting with them and worldview. Yeah, can we have a look at the next one, Natch? This is an interesting one. If people are coming here to work or even to go to school, this will be a big thing for them. In the UK, you can go into an office block and you don't really know. You go into an office, you wouldn't know who the boss is. He's not wearing different clothes to anybody else. And a lot of offices are now open plan, and you wouldn't know who the boss particularly is. And he's just like everybody else. It's like, if you look at the TV, you look at Mark Zuckerberg on the TV, he's just wearing a t-shirt and you know, he doesn't look any more fancy than the average man on the street. I mean, I don't know what kind of, maybe he is, but in Asia, often the cultures in Asia, the boss is really revered, and he looks different, and he has a different place in the office, and you would know who he is. And so there, I think part of what David was saying earlier about you know, the pastor telling you to go on holiday, it's a bit like that. The pastor could be also regarded as a sort of a boss. The boss is to be respected, and you do what he says, and he is really the boss. And you used to have a different word when you speak to him, maybe a different term. You wouldn't just say Bob, you would say sir, or something of that nature. You know, there is a different relationship and a different attitude to the boss. Whereas in this country, our culture's got much less. It's become a very, very sort of low culture in a way. We don't have these sort of definitions anymore. We don't really have the sort of the respect maybe for the boss that perhaps we used to 50 years ago. But for a Chinese person coming to the UK to then work, he would find it quite difficult to call the boss Bob. You know, he'd want to call him sir. They find it quite difficult to just say to the teacher at school, you know, miss or something. They would want to have more of a respect term, and they would want the children to also have that. You know, so it is quite different, you know, from the worldview of the Asian worldview of the British person, even just the way we treat our bosses. Has anybody got anything to say about this one in particular? Any of you guys who've been in Asia, is this something you've come across?
Very definitely, you can't go home before the boss goes home.
Right.
In Japan, and you stay, even in a church service, there was an expectation, I think, to stay until everybody else had gone, if you were a missionary or a leader in the church. And I find that still colours my thinking now, even not being officially a leader in the church, but I just need to stay around until everybody's gone. It's really quite strange to see how much I've been influenced.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel guilty if I leave, in other words, early, you know, even during the coffee time.
I think it's also quite significant the way the terms that we use for each other, you know. When we were living in the Philippines, everybody in the neighborhood, you would have a sort of a hierarchy of terms for them depending on how old they were. So if they were younger than you, you'd call them, you know, younger person Bob or whatever. And then if they were older than you, you had a series of other names that you would put before their name, so that it was a term of respect. And even even a sibling group, a younger brother had to call his older sister Ate. You wouldn't just call her by her name, because that would be disrespectful. And so for them, it's super hard I know Filipino friends have come here and heard my nephews and nieces just calling me Liz, you know, and they're like years younger than me, but they would find that grating, you know, that there was no respect. But of course, they come from a culture which is highly respectful to even the smallest age difference. You know, really, everything's worked out very, very intricately. And yet coming into a culture which all that is gone. So it's quite hard for folks from that sort of worldview and culture to, you know, come into our country and cope with us all, really. But it's good to you know, get to grips with these differences and try to understand each other and work through them. Right, Nat, should we have a look at the next one? This is yeah. Don't know if you agree with this. In Britain, when we're angry, you can tell she's angry, or yeah, the boss, or, you know, my friend at work, you know, yeah, they were pretty grumpy today and they showed it. In Asia, it may not be the same. They may be smiling at you, but they actually may be really angry with you. Don't know if anybody experienced this in their times interacting with folks from different cultures. You thought everything was fine, but actually they were extremely offended by something, but you had no idea. I don't know if anybody's had an experience like this. Please feel free to share if you feel that you can.
Not so much with anger, but more, you know, people talking about maybe a family member that's just died, and they would be kind of smiling and even laughing or giggling. And it took me a while to realise that it was just, yeah, it was too close to home to have to try and express it in a tearful way. They're not going to go that direction. It was much more, yeah, it was okay to use that kind of facial expression to express something so deep.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took me a while to get used to that.
Yeah. And there's an element of maybe not wanting to disappoint you or embarrass you in the moment by telling you that they're really upset with you. So they'll smile and then they'll go away and tell somebody else maybe that, you know, you had said something offensive, or me. Sorry, I'm giving my own example here. It's very easy to, yeah, I've had many experiences like this where I thought I behaved really well, but apparently not. And the person was upset with me and then would tell somebody else, and it would come back to me that, oh, and then I thought, but they were smiling, you know, they looked happy. But yeah, it's just a different way and a different worldview and a different way to express, and a different whole pile of reasons why that would be the case.
This isn't just about facial expression. It's also about how people respond to what you're saying. I found on building sites that people would agree with whatever I said. I'd ask them to do something. I would say, okay, do you agree that by next week such and such thing is going to happen?
Mhm.
And they would say, absolutely, yes, 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 yes. And usually it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so we'd have the same conversation the next week.
Mm.
But they didn't want to upset me by saying, actually, we can't do that, or we
Mm.
haven't agreed to do that.
Mm.
Their first instinct was to agree with me, to please me.
Yeah.
But I just found it so perplexing that they would agree things and then not do them, because there wasn't a common mind. I didn't understand the culture. I didn't find a way, at first at least, of actually finding out what they thought,
Yeah.
as opposed to what they were saying.
Right. I think the next slide actually, Natch, might have a bit of an insight into that particular scenario.
Right.
Yeah, when you've gone along and said, oh, can you get a ton of bricks for next Saturday? And they've said yes. And you know, we in the UK, when we say yes, we mean yes. And when we say no, we mean no. But actually, it can be so offensive to say no for somebody from Singapore. You know, they would not want to put you on the spot, not want to be negative. They don't want to offend you. They don't want to appear rude by saying, no, we can't do it. So it's much better for them and for you in the moment for them to say yes. It doesn't mean that they've lied. It just means that they want to preserve your preserve your relationship. It's very awkward, isn't it? Because we need that ton of bricks. But yeah, and I've had this when I've invited somebody to attend a Bible study, and they said, yes, I'll be there, you know, but actually they had no intention of going, but they didn't want to offend me. So, or I could get on my high horse and say, oh, that person lied to me. In fact, it was that person not wanting to offend, and I'd put them on the spot by requiring a direct answer. And somehow we need to learn from that, and as you said, David, find what kind of suits them, and then work from a sort of a roundabout way, and not maybe expect the direct yes.
And in one-on-one Bible studies, it's something to really watch for, that you don't put someone on the spot and say, would you like to be a Christian? Because often that can lead to difficult responses. Yeah, because they might often say yes. And you think, oh, job done. Maybe not. So.
Yeah, I remember doing, there was a closing ceremony from a Bible school in the Philippines. And the speaker who was invited that day to sort of give a challenging speech, preach, and all the rest of it. At the end of his preach, he said, "If there's anyone that wants to receive the Lord, just put up your hand. Come forward. Put up your hand now." And all the graduating Bible students who were solid Christians already, but they all put their hands up. And that really taught me a huge lesson of, you don't put people on the spot. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to offend you, and they will say yes, even though it's not really appropriate necessarily. It was quite interesting. Yeah, we enjoyed that particular event. So we asked the martyrs, why did you put your hand up? You know, you're a believer. You've been a believer for 10 years. He said, oh, well, he's a nice man, and we wanted him to have a good day, sort of thing, So anyway, that's the yes one. The yes may sometimes be yes, but it may not. Something else we cover in the course, I'm going to race through the last bit now, is face and the loss of face. A huge concept in the East, and not really something that we get here, I would say. And it's, and if we have offended somebody, for us, we can say, oh, I'm sorry, and maybe apologize and expect things to go back to normal. But for somebody maybe from an Eastern culture, the loss of face might be really deep and might be very difficult to repair, might take a lot more than the British sort of sorry, might need to have more done. Interestingly, there was a bit of a conflict right here in Bristol, actually, between two fairly, be careful I can't mention any names because there's lots of people from Bristol in school, two very eminent people had a fallout. And one of them is Chinese, and she's been in this country for 20 years. And you think, surely she's changed her glasses by now. Surely she knows about British stuff. A British person of similar, standing in the community said something in public to her on a Zoom call that absolutely offended her. And since that time, she's made a lot of trouble. She's resigned her job. She's spoilt the project they were on. And it seems that they can't understand why she didn't accept the sorry, that they did. And it just goes so deep. An offense, a loss of face for an Asian person can actually go really deep. And it needs more thought how to repair it than perhaps we would understand. So we cover loss of face. Natch, could we race through the next couple of slides? We look at guilt and shame. We tend to come from a culture that focuses on guilt. Asian is shame more, thank you. Then relationships, we look at relationships in the East and the West and how different they could be. Thanks, Natch. We look at different ways that we communicate in the UK and in the East, and how sometimes even just non-verbal communication is massive in the East, and we sometimes are communicating non-verbally in a way that we didn't even realize that we've necessarily caused offense. Lydia, have you got something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the thing you said about apology and what you said about changing face. And I guess I was just wondering if that affects, that kind of mindset could also affect your understanding of the gospel, because, and kind of like how you teach, well, I guess sin, because if you're trying to understand that God can forgive you when you're repentant, if your kind of mindset is based off, well, actually, I find it really hard to accept apologies myself because of the culture, does that change how you have to, or kind of influence the way you have to teach the gospel? Because actually that concept of someone forgiving you regardless of what you do, and you not having to, all you have to do is believe to accept that forgiveness. I guess I just imagine that might have a impact on a kind of, and then linking back to what was said earlier, kind of then when they go back into the cultures, kind of feeling as though they have to do stuff to earn their faith. I guess just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
I think it is really good to try to get behind their thought patterns and their mindset, so that you can use the gospel. I know that the Asian culture has many pointers that you can actually use to bring the gospel message in. For example, if somebody has lost face because they're offended by somebody else, then you need to ask, well, in their culture, how do they repair that? And often it needs a public apology, not just somebody sending you an email saying sorry, but actually gathering those people together who were part of the if they heard the offense, and actually the offender saying sorry in that situation, and then often eating together, having a meal, and then that seems to be the way to go. It's not that they can't receive forgiveness or they can't receive the apology, but it's actually looking at the way that was done. We often drew in parallels with the Bible, where the offense was this, perhaps sin, the sin of the person, and Jesus coming in as a sacrifice, making amends for that sin, and for that sort of being the payment for that, for the sin. And they seem to have places where they can resonate with that. So it's really important to work out somebody's culture and somebody's thinking in order to make connections to the gospel message. But often the understanding of sin might be completely different. I know the culture we worked with, sin was only sin if it was found out. If it wasn't found out, it wasn't sinful. So often the person who uncovered the sin was the bad guy. So if you go and accuse somebody, oh, you're a thief, you actually end up being the sinner and not the guy who was the thief, because you expose the sin. So it's actually quite complex. But unraveling all those things, you can always find connections to the gospel message that, overrides and all the what Jesus did and all the different ways Jesus interacted with different people. You can always find something that will resonate with that person. But yeah, knowing how to handle conflict, knowing how to address a problem is crucial when it's interpersonal and that sort of thing. But yeah, does anybody else have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I think spending time doing Bible studies on things like grace, unconditional love, those kind of things can really be helpful, because it lets the Bible then speak to them about where things are at. Because most of us find these things hard, but I think when you're coming from a culture where relationships are based on doing stuff for other people, so it's very hard to see real examples of some of the things that are being talked about in the Bible and the concepts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I think I better press on. Do I have anything written down, Natch? I think it might be just, another thing we cover, huge topic, understanding of the spirit world. We think, people come, they're lecturers, they're, people that are well educated, and so we don't expect them to have any belief in the spirit world, except, God and Jesus and the angels, and, but actually this is a huge topic from people coming from Asian cultures. And this is another thing that we look at in detail when we do the worldview course, which is, again, it's over 3 sessions, and it's, I can't really go into it now, but it's something really important. And it's actually, you can ask your friends, your Asian friends, what do they understand, you can kind of ask questions about this and find out where they are with it all. And something else that we do, Natch, on the next slide, is another session on how to study the Bible with internationals. And it's really sharing ideas of what's worked and how to connect well. I think, as Rachel said, we want to make the Bible accessible to our international friends. We want to help them to really understand it in a way that resonates with them. And so we need to, think about how we present the Bible and how we go about that. So we do another session on that, which is really really key. But yeah, understanding their worldview and their culture really helps to point us in different directions with the Bible to help them to understand the gospel message. So that is basically my little bit about worldview. If anybody wants to do a training, I do trainings every now and then with different groups. You can sign up, send a message to Charles, and if you're interested in doing the course, we could do that sometime. I know you're all busy as students and things, but if you have got some free time, then sign up and we can look at things in a bit more detail. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Charles. There might be some more time for questions at the end if anybody has any, but thanks for listening. Hope you're still awake, everybody. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to quickly pop over to Miriam, who's in Gloucester. You could just tell us a bit about yourself, Miriam. Where have you been, what you're doing, and then you can tell us about Momentum Yes.
Right. Just before we do that, what's our timing?
Yeah, we're running a bit behind, but you can go till 3:45.
Okay, right. Okay, well, I'm unmuted. Okay, right. It said the host muted me, so I had unmuted myself and then got muted again. Anyway, I'm Miriam, and I worked with OMF in Japan. I'm afraid I'm full of cold and rather snuffly and croaky, and may sneeze every now and then. So just bear with me. I think it's a good thing we're online and not in person. And I'm going to share about a course called Momentum Yes. Has anybody heard of this course? Just if you have, just stick up a hand. Apart from, some of you have, Hannah, and of course some of our MF folks. I noticed that in the questions that some of you sent in, you were asking what kind of things you might be able to do. And Momentum, yes, is a course that anybody can use in your own churches, your own contexts, with a small group. And I'll go through what it is as I share my screen. But I see Natch has put up the link. I will show the link also in the PowerPoint, and we'll also see a trailer to it. And I'll go through a little bit of the content, and then at the end explain why I think it's good to do it, what the advantages are, and there is one negative that I will mention. So here we go. I hope you can all see that. So first of all, this is a course that comes out of
Can anyone else see it? Sorry, Miriam.
Yeah.
Can anyone? Oh, you can see it. Okay, sorry, just me.
Oh, why can't you see it?
I think it's just me, so don't worry. Carry on.
Oh, okay, right. So it's a course that originated with a church in the States, and it's a course which just generally encourage people to see what God is doing in the world. And it invites, as the flyer here says, it invites everyday people to rethink God's mission, the call of the church, and their individual roles. And the explanation that you'll find on the website is God has made it clear that we, his church, are his plan to tell the world about Jesus, the best news of the universe. There is no plan B. Our world is so much more global than it used to be, and Momentum, yes, helps us maximize our opportunity to make Jesus famous here, near, and far away. Jesus is building his church, and he wants this generation to say yes to joining the movement of seeing the gospel go to all peoples. So just a couple of clips from the Momentum Yes Facebook page. To belong to Jesus is to embrace the nations with him. William Carey, the father of modern missions, and a quote from Charles Swindoll, whatever we do, we must not treat the Great Commission like it's the Great Suggestion. So now I'm just going to play a trailer from the website.
Perspective. It's a powerful thing. Perspective has the ability to take something you've seen hundreds of times, something totally familiar, and then with a shift, completely change the way you view it forever. And if a different perspective could cause you to rethink one thing, maybe it could help you rethink everything.
We're going to invite you to do a lot of rethink. Rethink church, your neighbors, how you approach the Bible, God's mission on this earth, and the role your story has in that mission. It's hard to imagine that 40% of the world's population today does not have a realistic way to learn that Jesus is the best news.
Throughout all of Scripture, God is relentless about seeing his entire creation redeemed.
Did you catch who was invited to this banquet? All the people of the world. Seeing the gospel communicated to all peoples should be a major priority as his disciple. And now we're going to look at our stories in a different light.
The ultimate source of your identity and what qualifies you to do the good things of God doesn't come from what you've done, but from who God says you are. This is the highest calling we could possibly have, to live, speak, and reflect the glory of God.
It doesn't take a special call from God or a seminary degree. Our relationships have the potential to reach the world.
God didn't intend for missions to be just a department or ministry of our churches. God has planned it to be the foundation of all ministry, but everyday people can change everything when they are a part of God's mission.
Our generation is the generation responsible to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. We can be the ones to see every people group have access to the gospel, because what we know for certain is that there is momentum.
When everyday people say yes to joining the momentum of what God is doing in the world, that's when we see everything in our world change.
So what is the content of the course? The first session, and the session's about 90 minutes. You can divide it into 12 sessions, in which case you would just do 45 minutes, or I have also divided it up so that I only did it over a period of 5 weeks. So you can do all sorts of different things with it, but basically there are 6 topics which are covered. And the first one is rethinking perspective, the perspective on the Old Testament and perspective on the New Testament. And one of the things that really struck me when I both did this course and also facilitated it for other people was the impact of reading the verses in the Old Testament about how God's global heart for the world, really. Just the whole stretch of Bible is about sharing the good news with the nations. And in the process of talking about nations, they talk about the ethnic groups, and in some sessions also the concept of unreached people groups. And there are lots of prayer resources which participants are encouraged to use actually during the sessions for different unreached people groups of the world. The objectives of each session are very clear. So head, hands, and heart, and they're always challenging things to think about. I'm just going to stop the share there and just show you all being well. If I can go back to sharing screen and go to session 1 on the internet. Can you see that? Oops, seem to have got the wrong one there. Stop share. Did the right screen come up? Share, right. Can you see rethink perspective? Did somebody just say yes to me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is just to show you there are massive online resources. So the first session has video 1 and an introduction and discussion questions. And I'm not going to show you the video, but I'll just show you, you can click on the little box which says show video notes and highlights, and you can see some of the things that are covered in the first session. So for example, a new perspective on China, that in 1949, there were 750,000 Christians, but today China has 85 million Christians. Although probably there are a lot more, or we don't really know, but China and the United States have roughly the same number of Christians. I found that kind of statistic just blows people's minds. And then new perspective on the Muslim world. We tend to think of, or I did until I started using this course, think that the Middle East, Asia and North Africa, predominantly Muslim areas, are very resistant. But in fact, there are many movements to Christ, more than 1,000 individuals baptized, or more than 100 Christian churches planted in a region within 20 years. Those are called movements to Christ. So Muslim movements to Christ, according to these statistics, there have been 75 movements of people leaving Islam since 2000 to join the family of Jesus in countries like Iran, Algeria, Malaysia, and Pakistan. So just very encouraging. And then some of the needs of the world. In the next session, there is information about the 1040 window, the fact that only, I think it's 3% of finances and personnel go to the 95% of the most unreached peoples in the world. And then there are discussion questions, then lots of information on the Old Testament. So just loads of quotes there, showing how God's desire to see people from every nation, language, and ethnicity in relationship with him. Some of them I find quite challenging, in the sense that I haven't quite thought of them, like the story of Daniel, for example. I thought of it in terms of God giving individuals personal protection. And I've now started, if I'm using this course with a group, I ask them at the beginning of the session, before they know that they're going to hear anything about Daniel, I say to them, what does the story of Daniel, what is the primary lesson that you yourselves would take out of the story of Daniel? And they will generally say all this about protection and so on. But this particular Momentum Yes course emphasizes the fact that King Darius, after the end of this story of Daniel in the lion's den, he says, I declare that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble with fear before the God of Daniel. And so this declaration of a pagan king was spoken because God wanted the whole world to know about him. So that's just one example of how I came to have a slightly different perspective on what is a very familiar Bible story. And then there's a video plus content and discussion questions on the New Testament. So that's the first session. I'm going to just stop there, go back to my PowerPoints. And hopefully there'll be a bit of time for you to ask questions at the end. I'll just continue on going with the content of the course. So the second session, and I'm not going to go to the online resources for this. The second session is rethinking missions. So it deals with things like the current status of the church, the task remaining, the challenges ahead. And this is, of course, in relation to the whole world. So it's one of the advantages, I think, of this course is that it doesn't focus on a particular mission organization or on a particular area of the world, but just general mission in general. So it's suitable really for any context. The importance of prayer, and the actual session involves praying for unreached people groups, and there is a link on the website to I think it's prayercast.com, which has some fabulous videos for most of the ethnic groups in the world, about 2 to 3 minutes, which I have sometimes used in church services just on their own. Brilliant resources there. And so it's also a very practical course because you actually get involved in prayer together as a group. The week before last, I was doing this with a home group in my church, and I opted to use materials on one of the ethnic groups in Afghanistan because that was so relevant, really, and up-to-date information. And then session 3, Rethink Identity. So the beginning of our story, this is focusing on Genesis and how in Genesis God created people and the world to be good, and it was only later that sin came in. So we are created in the image of God, and having been created in the image of God means that we have a responsibility to reflect that image. And again, at the beginning of this session, I've started to ask people, in what ways does God bless you, and how do you see God's blessing in your life? And of course, they'll go on about things like health and grace and salvation and all the many ways in which God has blessed us. But very few people come up with the fact that we are blessed to be a blessing to others. And that comes out very strongly in this session, which I think is extremely good. So rethinking our identity as image bearers. And we are blessed to be a blessing is the key message from that. Then rethinking involvement. This is divided it basically into 3 sections. Going, sending, and mobilizing. But it's not just, it's broken down into a number of very practical steps. And so I'm just going to show you, come out of this again and show you a document. I should have mentioned that there is an ebook digital guide that you can download that goes with this course, which has all the information, all the discussion questions, the summary of the videos in it. And it is absolutely excellent. It has everything you need, really, although you might want to adapt it to your own situation. It does have 100 pages, so it is very long because there are some indexes on church history and things like that as well. And there is a section related to session 4, which is called Practical Ways to Go, Send and Mobilize. Well, because it is coming out of the States, there are some things in it that I found were not quite relevant perhaps to a UK context. So I slightly rewrote it. And I've included organizations that we are more familiar with in this country. So for example, with the section on Go, Oscar, which is a great website for resources and information, global connections, and so on. What I find very helpful and practical about this course is that, for example, even under the section for going, it isn't just a matter of getting on a plane and going somewhere. And after David's talk, we might reconsider anyway whether we want to increase the carbon footprint. But it's just going can consist of talking to people from other backgrounds whom you see in stores, restaurants, or your church. It can consist of adopting an international student, being mindful of individuals from other backgrounds in neighborhood, school, or workplace, assisting refugees, and so on, volunteering to teach your language. It can even just be reading a resource like Across the Street and Around the World. I can send this, this is a 3-page, no, it's just a 2-sided, A4 2-sided sheet. I can send this to anybody who would like to have it, or to all of you later. And then there's Send, Discover. This is just sort of encouraging also, just learning. This is also in OMF 6 Ways of Mission. One of the 6 ways is learning. And Momentum, yes, covers all those 6 ways, although it divides it into the 3 larger categories. You see here we've got learning about different worldviews, which we've just heard about. Could you encourage your church to study together? Invest, giving to those who are going to mission. Helping a missionary go to a retreat, something like that. A lot of these things are things that many of you may be doing already. Pray when you hear about world events on the news. Of course, prayer is such a key thing. I've already mentioned Prayercast.com videos. I discovered those last year, and they are absolutely excellent. Join a prayer group, etc., etc. When you drive past local mosque, pray. In Gloucester, we have several mosques. I also, when I look out of my window, when families are walking their children to the primary school just up the road in the mornings, I just pray for different nationalities that are going past below my window. And then mobilizing. This is a course that really encourages people just to take a small step. So things that we can all do, maybe to serve on a committee, organize a prayer group, or just even maybe facilitate this kind of course with a group of friends, or suggest it to a pastor in your church and that kind of thing. So that's a very, very quick rush through some of the practical things that are in the session on session 4 on rethink involvement. Another thing that was mentioned in their list is under the theme of learning or discovering, it's just reading some reading books and encouraging other people to read. This is something that I've been intentionally trying to do in the last 3+ years since retiring home to the UK. I also have a sheet where I've just put these 5 books on. They're all books that Ultimate Grace is about Japan, so I'd read that one before, but the other 4 are all books that I have come across in the last year, and which I can't put down. Congo, the one on the right of the screen, We Died Before We Came Here, is extremely moving story about a couple working in North Africa. Taste of Asia is for kids. In a local church here in Gloucester, one of our Bridge in Asia volunteers bought a number of copies and gave them to different families in the church, and they were all excited and bought a whole lot more to give to other families. I've also found that if you use 10 of those publishers, you'll see I've put that up there. For example, you can buy, I bought 10 copies of Brahmin Reborn, which is about a Hindu coming to Christ, and I got those for £1. So I sell them if I have the opportunity for £1, or you can give them away to people because they are so very reasonably priced. Just encouraging people to read and expand their knowledge. So session 5 is Rethink Opportunity. Connecting with neighbours from different backgrounds, praying for neighbours, and again, just more practical ways of being involved. Interestingly, on Thursday night, I was doing, I think it was session 4, actually, it wasn't 5, but one of the people in my group said to me that her neighbour is a Muslim imam here in Gloucester. Unfortunately, I don't seem to have any multicultural people in my particular road, or certainly not close around me, but certainly some in my church living next door to people from different countries. And it was very encouraging to hear her say that she prays regularly for the family, but it's very difficult. Actually, they're very friendly, but it's very difficult to have a spiritual conversation. But I think maybe just our discussing it together may have encouraged her to think about how that could be possible. And then session 6, Rethinking Our Lives, Now What? Asking people and challenging people to actually take some kind of step forward, even if it's just a very small step, such as initiating a conversation with somebody in their workplace, or reading a book, or praying for people they pass in the street. And to finish up, if we have time, I'd like to show a video, but just finish up with just saying why I think this is something that probably all of us could use. The materials are all there on the website and are free for anyone to use. You can use them in Zoom or in person. There are lots of ready prepared videos, discussion questions, downloadable digital booklet with summary of all the content, which can also be viewed online below each video, as we saw with session 1. There's also a group leaders guide, which is helpful. So all you need to do to use this course is to familiarize yourself with the material and adapt it to your situation if you wish. You don't have to. I think it's generic enough not to do that. The only negative thing that I have come across is that it's not yet possible to download the main videos. I was able to download the trailer and I downloaded the video, which I would just like to show in a minute. And I have found that a disadvantage at the time when the first time I ran the course, which was in May and June, and we had a number of people from all over different parts of the country, and I did have problems with bandwidth issues and difficulty playing the videos. I found it's been okay since then, the second time of running it myself. So I think we're nearly running out of time, but we'll just...
While you're getting the video up and running,
well, it's there. Yep.
People who have done it where rather than share the video, they share the link to the video, and people can just watch it on their own device. So that's another way of doing it. Yes, indeed.
That is a very good idea. Yeah, to do that. In fact, if I bumped up my Wi-Fi by £3 a month, and it seems to have solved the problem. But or just people are not on Zoom quite so much in the evenings. But I was going to do that if it didn't work the second time round. So yeah, great. Okay, we're just going to watch. This is a video. I think it's from session 5, which I find very moving.
The job is not done in the world that Christ gave us to do, and the mandate is still binding on us today. That's why we speak of unreached people groups. But the missions is the back-breaking, culture-penetrating, darkness-shattering initiative.
Right, well, I think that may have been an example of what I was just talking about, as it suddenly seemed to stop in the middle. So I think I'll just leave it there. But if you go to Momentum, yes, you can find this video, The Tears of the Saints, and it really is very well worth. And you can download that one. And I also recommend that you might possibly even think of it just showing it. You can show that just on its own and not just as part of the course. So an excellent, I don't know how many times I've seen it now, but every time I see it, I'm just moved by it afresh. So any questions or comments? Do you think this is something that you might be able to use somewhere? Is it something you'd like to explore into more? How many? Yes, I can see a nod from, yeah.
We did it as Bristol CU over lockdown together, and it was really, really helpful, really encouraging, and like really eye-opening as well, like with loads of statistics and like really good resources. I especially enjoyed like the information about praying for unreached people groups. I thought it was really, really helpful. So yeah, I would really recommend it to people as well.
Good. That's very encouraging to hear that. Have you any stories of people who have actually taken some action as a result?
Well, I think because we did it and it was part of like the international work of the CU, and so I think it definitely just helped people like become more aware of like why it's really like important to reach international students. And so it was just really helpful for that, and for like getting excited about how we can reach them on campus as well.
Good. Any other feedback? People you've heard use it, or definitely I would talk to your churches about it, or if you have any involvement in student groups of any type, either on campus or youth groups in churches, but any group. I think it works well with any group. Okay. No other burning questions? Right, back to you then, Charles. I think we've, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. That was very, very insightful. And now we've got, we're just going to hand back to David Gould, who is going to just give us a bit of a roundup and then try and answer some of your questions that you've sent in. So David, where's he gone?
Well, thank you, Charles, and thank you, Natch, for hosting us this afternoon, and thank you, Miriam and Liz and Rachel, for your presentations. We were really hoping to meet today, Charles and Liz's house, not just for the lunch that Liz is famous for, but just to get to know you a bit better. But I do hope, I'm sure we all hope, that this has been of interest and helpful to those taking part. And thank you for listening and encouraging each other to take part. So the idea now is to have an open mic session. Some of you shared questions online, and I think we've tried to answer some of those questions, but you may have other questions, either you want to raise now or in some other way. We're really here to engage with you, to help you on your journey as best we can. So please think about any questions you want to put to any of us now, or to us as a panel of speakers, as it were. Just to pick up on what Miriam has been saying, the different ways of engaging in mission. The thing about prayer, I too want to emphasize that this is not an optional extra. Without prayer, there's no fruit. We might be busy, we think we're doing good stuff, but prayer is essential. But also, one or two of you have asked about calling. How do you test a call? And certainly part of our story for my wife and I, God's call came through being part of a prayer group. This is a very common experience, I think, that as you pray for a people group, for a part of the world, for a particular work, God will call you in some way through that. So encouraging you to pray would be absolutely top of my list of what comes out of today. I'm sure you're already praying, but I think one thing that would be helpful to us is to hear from you how we can support you in that, how we can encourage and make prayer doable, given your other commitments and so on. There are prayer groups in Bristol, for instance, that you can join, or you may be part of a prayer group already. But if you want ideas or suggestions, about praying for the work of cross-cultural mission, please let us know, and we'll do what we can to help you. But think in terms of prayer as about listening. God speaks to us as we pray. He speaks to us for sure. The other thing I want to say very briefly is about going. there is still a need to go. It's not like that's old-fashioned mission. There is still the need to go. But we can go in different ways. We can go short-term, as some of you have already done, or we can go long-term, or we can go serial short-term placements. And OMF does this in a number of areas where people go every year, very regularly, to engage in the work in some specific way, serial short-term engagement in mission. And the last way of going is the 11th hour, you know, the last group of workers that God called into the vineyard. It's never too late. If God's calling you in later life to go, to change direction, to take on some new ministry, it's okay. He has a place for you. He values that contribution of being in the last batch of workers, as it were, in the vineyard. So don't dismiss going, but also think, as Rachel's encouraged us, what it means to welcome. And as students, many of you, obviously, are aware of this amazing privilege we have of welcoming students in Bristol. They claim, the university, that there are 130 nationalities represented in Bristol. That's an amazing thought. And what a privilege. And these are people of great potential who are open in ways that perhaps they wouldn't have been if we'd met them at home. So those are just a few thoughts about different ways of engaging, learning, praying, going, sending, welcoming, and inspiring. Tell your story, write your story, and tell it, and go on reshaping it and tell new stories about how God has touched your hearts to become involved in mission in some way. A story is so powerful, and God can really use it to touch hearts. So we'd love to hear from you now. If you've got questions, please feel free to share them, or any thoughts, things that we missed, things perhaps you don't agree with, whatever, please feel free to speak into this conversation that we're having.
How can we find out more about the prayer groups that you mentioned? There's one like in Bristol. Yeah, do you have like more information on how we can get involved with that?
Well, there is a prayer group that meets once a month on the third Monday. It meets just up the road here in Redland. We'd love to welcome you at that prayer group. Or you may want to start your own prayer group, and perhaps one or two of us can come and help you be part of that. Maybe you'd like to just drop a line to Charles and Liz, and we can help you just find what works for you. I mean, clearly your time, your commitments may be different from other people's, and that's often the issue, is finding a time that works for a group of people. But we'd love to help you with that. So
David,
let's hear from you. Yeah.
Sorry, doesn't Ruth do a prayer group that kind of, they do WhatsApp and they have breakfast and stuff?
She has done that. That has rather gone quiet. Maybe we should revive it. And I think we could see this as perhaps, I don't know, a toolbox of different strategies for prayer, meeting together, WhatsApp sort of bullet point prayers, different ways of engaging in prayer. And there's also, of course, prayer groups focused on particular people groups, particular cultures, if you like, and more general prayer groups. So the one that meets in Redland is focused on the West region of OMF, the people who've been sent out from the west of England and Wales to different ministry in East Asia. But there are also online resources like the WhatsApp group. So I think if maybe you tell us, Hannah, if you tell us what would work for you, what kind of thing is doable, given you've got so many other things going on, no doubt, that if you can tell us a bit more about what would work, then I'm sure we'll do what we can to make some suggestions. Yeah.
Can I just add that we do have an online prayer, but we call it a prayer day. It's not a whole day, and you can dip in and out actually every 2 months on either a Saturday, a sort of morning going to lunchtime, or on a Tuesday. So it goes Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, and we get folks from Asia to give their kind of prayer requests, and we pray for them. And there's usually quite a lot. It's just an online thing. That might be something you might want to dip into. We can give you some ideas, and maybe you'd like to try 1 or 2 and see which one works for you better. But we can be in touch about that, Hannah, on email or something.
Thank you.
Lydia, did you want to say something? Did you have your hand up? Lydia?
Yeah, sure, I'll ask a question. It wasn't related to that, but I just wanted to ask for some advice really, because I am running a international Bible study with the international kind of subcommittee of the CU, and I guess I was just wondering, because the kind of guidance I've been given is to do that kind of a Bible study that was kind of for the UCCF in general, but kind of flicking through it, like it may well work, but flicking through it is definitely written with kind of like British Western students in mind, like it's written for them, and a lot of, I get, so kind of one concern is that it's written with their kind of our like understanding of the world in mind. Also kind of, I guess I don't know what to expect in terms of kind of language as well, because I know kind of international students are humbling and how good they humble me and how good they are at English, but still there's an element of some jargon and kind of words can be quite difficult. That could be a barrier to sharing the gospel, because you kind of spend so much time like explaining terms and things. So I'm kind of like unsure of whether to go with that, but also if I was to do something else that is more kind of aimed towards international students, there's the problem of kind of which culture, because there could be so many different cultures represented, so kind of how to do something that's accessible to lots of different ones, because this isn't specifically for like a specific kind of culture, it's for any international students. It's such a massive such a massive like potential group to try and make this study accessible to.
Rachel, I wonder if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is Friends International have tons of resources, really helpful ones. I've seen them used in various church international Bible study groups. Also the, what do you call the American international thing? What do you call it? It's not InterVarsity. Anyway, yes, I can get you those details. I have stuff that was written more with Chinese in mind. They're not vastly different from some of the other more generic things, but it just depends. You might find that you have a very heavily concentrated group of Chinese folks, so maybe it would be an idea to use some of that material. But if not, I would highly recommend some of the Friends International stuff. But I can get that to you, and we can have a chat even if you want about what would be helpful.
I know UCCF have an Uncover version that is called English for All, which is easier English. Like it's still, you might have to translate some of the cultural concepts, but at least the language is a bit easier. I think that's the John version, John English for All version. Yeah.
So anyone else, please feel free to tell us what's on your minds, ask questions, make comments.
I have a question, which we've talked a lot about, like cultural differences, and I just wondered, for those of you who've lived abroad for quite a long time, how did you kind of like deal with culture shock, and also I guess reverse culture shock coming back to the UK, having lived abroad? Like, how do you cope with that? Because it can be really hard to like readjust or adjust to a new culture. Yeah, how have people found that?
I guess we've all got stories to tell about that. I think we all expect culture shock when we're starting out, when we're going somewhere, but perhaps we're less prepared for reverse culture shock. But I think we should see this as an opportunity for growth, to just become less parochial, to become more aware of what God's doing, the richness of different cultures. I love the picture in Revelation of God welcoming gifts from every culture and all the languages that are going to be there, worshiping God around the throne of grace. And so to me, although it's hard and painful to deal with culture shock, it's actually something I think to welcome and to work through, and to do it together, to learn from others. I mean, people like Miriam, who've been in Japan, such a different culture for so many years. Miriam, tell us what it was like coming home for you. Or was it coming home? Coming back to where is home?
Well, I've written the whole chapter on, but it's not called, but it's not home, in the book that Natch mentioned in the chat, which just published. Yeah, it just is not home anymore. But 4 years, nearly 4 years on, I do feel it is home again, but certainly it takes 2 or 3 years at least. And I still have times of, you know, during the Olympics, somebody texted me and said, the cycle race is on around the bottom of Mount Fuji. Are you watching? It's beautiful. And so I wasn't watching it, so I put the television on. But actually, it made me feel so homesick. I quickly turned it off. Because there were actually recognized places. And I just sometimes get overwhelmed by things like that. But on the other hand, I think it's if you know where you, even when my first Sunday back here, December 2017, people kept saying, welcome home, welcome home. And I was almost screaming inside saying, but it's not home. But I felt very rebuked when I went home afterwards, and I thought, and I felt God was saying to me, well, you know, this is the place where you should be. You know, it was the right time to retire, that you couldn't have stayed in Japan. You know that I've got something for you to do while you're here. So stop, you know, grumbling about it, and just don't say, I'm back, which is what I wanted to say. Say I'm home. And I actually positively decided at that point I was going to say to people, yes, I'm home. It's good to be home, even if I didn't feel like that. So, yeah, it takes a long time. But I think if you know with any type of culture shock, whether it's going or it's reverse culture shock coming back, if you know you are in the place where God wants you to be, then you can cope with anything.
I think as far as going the other way when we start out, the thing I learned the hard way is that there's a reason for everything, that people do things or believe things for a reason. So even if it seems completely unreasonable or wacky to us, the first thing to do is to listen and not to be too quick to say what you think about something. I mean that was my experience with building, how things got done. There was always a reason why they were done in such and such a way, and I think to listen is a good posture in mission to have, not to be too quick to come out with a solution, the definitive response to some problem. The other thing to say is that we found coming home to Bristol from Singapore is that actually you can still stay in touch with people. We're still part of a Singapore prayer group. We Skype with friends quite regularly. So although we're not physically with them, I think we're all learning through COVID, particularly this new world we're in, that you can have meaningful engagement after you've physically left the place where God has called you. And we should be open to that. On the other hand, that's the time to move on. And we did see people hanging on too long. I have to say, some people who found it very difficult to hear the call to come home, and that's not easy. The people are very committed to a particular work. It is painful, it's costly, but there is a right time, and this is a collective thing. This is why teams are so important in mission work, that we listen to our colleagues and their wisdom and pray with them about the timing, about moving on, and what new ministries should look like. There is a retirees network in OMF. When you get to that kind of age, there's a whole group of people who are supporting each other and helping through these transitions, certainly for returning to your birthplace, whatever you might call it. Yeah. So that's a great question. Any others that come to mind?
Just quickly, David, I know with COP26 coming up soon, how do you recommend that we as Christians should be viewing that, getting involved, what have you? I know you've mentioned prayer. Obviously, we can be praying, but is there anything else we can be doing?
Well, prayer is fundamental. There's actually a group of Christians who've been to all these climate conferences. A whole bunch of Singaporeans went to the Paris COP 5 or 6 years ago, and they have some amazing testimonies of how they got to meet government officials. Singapore Minister for the Environment, they actually had a conversation in Paris. They would never have done that at home. And people listened. They had a voice. Christians have a voice in these conferences. So we can pray for good outcomes. We can pray for Christians who are involved. We can pray for Christians who are hosting delegates. In Glasgow, the churches are being asked to host people from all over the world. Thousands are coming. And this is a fantastic opportunity for the churches to be hospitable and to learn to hear what climate change actually means for people from the global south, which is hugely disruptive and worrying. But we can also write to our MPs. This works. We've done it, our church in Bristol. We've actually written to our MP about COP26. So not just writing as individuals, but as churches. And we are assured that from the Bishop of Bristol, actually, she initiated this, that churches writing are even more significant in terms, people will count count the voices, the number of people who are actually bothering to make, to express an opinion. So please write to your MP, please put pressure on your local councillors who, in Bristol, we have an objective of net zero carbon by 2030. This is hugely ambitious policy. So we need to help be part of that transition to a net zero carbon economy in the city. The churches have a great opportunity to model that and to be heard. That we care about this stuff for good reason. So that's just a few thoughts.
Yeah, Lydia sent some really good questions actually, which were quite kind of meaty and heavy, and probably would take about half an hour to answer each one. But about, where your questions going? To what extent does the move towards training local communities and leaders to carry out mission work rather than the white saviorism reduce the need for us from a Western country to live and work overseas, if at all? That was one of your questions, Lydia, and another one about any recent changes and shifts in mission, looking, into the future. And I think we would all agree that in the future, I mean, the future has already changed, isn't it? We've been changed. We've all been changed by the pandemic, and there are massive changes and things that we have to think through in our mission about going forward. A lot of our workers have had to get out of the places they're in and stuff like that. So we've had a lot of thinking to do about the future and about changes that we would make. And I think we would all agree also that it's so important to empower the folks in the communities, local leaders. It's what we're seeing now is all the missionaries had to pull out of some countries, and it's just the local leaders that are there carrying on. So it's so vital that they are empowered to do that work. But I think we'd also agree that there's still a need. There's still a work to be done. It's not finished yet, and so whoever God is calling needs to make strides in that direction. There's a great paper that was written by the guy who's written Operation World, Jason Mandrake. That chap. He wrote something during COVID called Global Transmission, Global Mission. It's a paper written about mission kind of going forward and other things as well. And it's really good, and it asks some really good questions, but also points in a really good direction as well. So if you've got time to find that and read it, Lydia, it's actually really good. And it might be helpful we could send you that link. Rather than me try and answer your questions in 1 minute, when they are actually really kind of slightly more extensive answers required, I believe. Does anybody else want to say anything about that? No, don't think so. Okay, we'll send you that link, Lydia. I think it would answer it better than I can.
So I think perhaps we should draw this particular session to a close, but please feel free to come back to us with questions or thoughts. Hopefully, Charles and Liz, you can share our contact details. Would that be doable? Just send out a list of email. We can Skype, Zoom with you, or meet with you in Bristol, whatever works for you. So I'm going to hand over now to Natch, who's going to give us a forward view about NextGen. What is Next? Tell us, Natch.
Yeah, sorry, just briefly. So NextGen is an event for students and young workers who are trying to find their place in mission, trying to find out how to get involved in what God is doing, to gather people from every tribe and tongue to be worshiping him for his glory. And so this is a NextGen event. and we have them in different parts of the country. The next one is November the 6th, Saturday, November the 6th, which is being organized by the London team, but it is online again. So even if you're in sunny Bristol, you can still join in on online. So look out for that. And I'll just put in the chat a link to some of the previous NextGen events. But we'd love to see you there, and invite your friends to come along as well. There you go. That's it.
Thanks, Natch. Well, that's our conference for the day. If you want to stay on and chat to anybody, you can feel free to do that once we've ended the meeting. Natch will keep us online for those who want to stay and chat. But I'll just close in prayer, and then that'll be it. Yeah. So let's pray. Lord God and Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the things that we have heard this afternoon. We thank you for the different speakers that have shared. We thank you for the different issues that have been raised in mission and in our thinking about mission. And we ask, Lord, that you would hear our prayers for these particular things. We ask, Lord, that you would answer the questions that we have, and that you would make yourself known to us in the way that you would want us to serve you in the world in the days ahead. So we thank you for this day. We thank you for this conference. We thank you for being with us, for guiding and leading us. Thank you for the technology that has worked. And we just ask now that you would go with us as we go our different ways. In Jesus' name, amen.